In this month's cybersecurity video, we will be looking at something that is maybe not directly related to cybersecurity, but is still very pertinent to everyone, because we will be looking at the Protection of Personal Information Act, or maybe better known as POPIA. POPIA is going to have a huge impact on all South African businesses, and with fines of up to 10 million rand and prison terms of up to 10 years, every South African business needs to ensure that they are compliant. You may think that it does not affect you, but it does. If your business deals with any sort of personal information of your customers or third parties in any way, then POPIA will impact you. Things like a name, a surname, an ID number, phone number, email address, online account number, postal address, physical address, biometrics such as a fingerprint or a face is all considered to be personal information in terms of POPIA. And if you do anything with this type of information, you are considered to be processing it in terms of POPIA. Processing means that you are dealing with information in some other form. In order to comply with POPIA, you need to process personal information in accordance with the 8 principles set out in the Act. In this video, we will quickly look at these principles and then go into some practical tips for complying with them. This video is not a comprehensive course on POPIA, and you can obtain comprehensive POPIA training from the Law Trust Academy. So let's dive right into those conditions. Condition 1, accountability. In terms of POPIA, you as the responsible party, in other words, the person who determines what to do with personal information, has a dual accountability. You are accountable to the information regulator, you can think of that like the POPI police, and to each data subject individually. The implications of this is that if there is a data breach, you can be fined by the information regulator, but each of the people who were compromised in the data breach can still sue you in their personal capacity. Condition 2, processing limitation. This condition can be summarized as follows. You have to process personal information for a lawful reason. In other words, there must be a need for you to process someone's personal information, such as to enable you to do business with them. You may only process what you need. This is called minimality. In other words, if you do not need to collect certain information in order to do business with a person, just don't collect that information. The key. Thirdly, you need consent. In POPIA, almost everything can be overcome with consent. Consent is you asking for permission to process the information, and the data subject, remember, that is the person whose information you are processing, taking some positive action to give this consent. Consent is not a passive act. The data subject must make it clear that they give consent, and you must keep a record that the consent was in fact given. Examples of express consent include a recorded phone call where the data subject says, "Yes, I agree," or a document with a section where a person can tick a box to agree that their personal information may be processed. Another very important aspect around consent is the fact that you must first ask for consent before you can start using personal information. Also remember that a data subject may withdraw their consent to use their personal information at any time. This withdrawal will not affect the legitimacy of any process prior to the withdrawal and will still not prevent you from exercising your legitimate interest, such as under a contract. Condition 3, purpose specification. In essence, this condition requires that the information must be collected for a very specific, defined and lawful purpose that has been made clear to the data subject. What this means is that the data subject has to know the exact reason for the collection of their personal information. Under this condition, any personal information must also be kept for as long as you need it and must then be destroyed. So if the contract is concluded and you don't need the personal information associated with it anymore, you have to destroy that information. Condition 4, further processing limitation. This one is often linked to condition 2, processing limitation, and many people deal with it as a single condition. POPIA requires that any further processing must be done in accordance with or compatible with the original reason for processing. This means that if you outsource the processing of any personal information to a third party, it cannot be for a reason that is completely different to the original reason the information was collected for. To determine if further processing is compatible with the original processing, you have to ask whether there is a valid relationship between the initial processing and the further processing, the nature of the information concerned, what the consequences could be for the further processing. In other words, could this now cause the information to become public? How was the information collected in the first place, and are there any contractual rights or obligations between the parties? Condition 5. Information quality. It is very important to note that you, as a responsible party, have the duty to ensure that the information you have collected is complete, accurate, not misleading, and updated where necessary. We will show you how to do this in the quick win section of this video. Condition 6. Openness. This is one of those quite onerous POPIA principles where you have to remember a lot of things when collecting personal information. When collecting personal information, you have to inform the data subject of the following when collecting that information. That the information is being collected in the first place, the name and address of the responsible party, the purpose for which the information is being collected, whether or not the supply is mandatory or voluntary, the consequences for failure to provide the information. An example of this would be that you cannot enter into a cell phone contract with your service provider because you were not willing to disclose the information they required for the contract. If there is a law requiring the disclosure of the information, if the responsible party is going to disclose the information to a third country or an international organization, and what precautions that country has in place. All of this must be done before the information is collected, and I will get into how we can do this in the section about the practical steps you can take to become POPIA compliant. The important thing to note is that if you have done this once, you don't have to do it again for the same customer. Unless they withdraw their consent, then you would have to go through these steps again. Condition 7. Security safeguard. This step requires the responsible party to make sure that the information collected is kept safe and secure by applying the necessary technical and organizational measures to prevent loss of, damage to, or unauthorized destruction of personal information, and unlawful access to or processing of personal information. Again, POPIA is quite prescriptive on what is required here, but it comes down to the fact that you have to make sure that the information you have collected is kept safe and secure in such a way that you know where your weak points or risks are, and that you have taken reasonable steps to ensure that unauthorized people don't have access to the personal information, that you've established practices in using or sharing that personal information, and that you regularly test and update these practices to ensure that they are still relevant and still provide the protection you require. Again, we will provide you with the guidance you need to ensure basic compliance in the quick win section, and fortunately, POPIA is not unreasonable when it comes to this. Another very important thing to remember is that as a responsible party, you are ultimately responsible for the actions of your operators. These are the people that you outsource any of the processing functions to. If they fail to observe the proper security, you will be responsible to the information regulator. Condition 8. Data subject participation. The final condition we will be looking at is data subject participation. Think of this one as the inclusiveness condition. It basically requires that a data subject has the following rights in respect of personal information about him or her. They have the right to request you to inform them whether you hold any personal information on them. They have the right to request you to release to them any personal information that you or a third party holds on them, and the right to request you to delete or correct any personal information. The right to delete is limited though, so if you need that information to act in terms of a contract, or if you need it for any other legitimate reason, you do not have to delete that information. So this was a very quick look at the 8 conditions that you have to comply with in terms of POPIA. I know it sounds like a large amount of information to absorb and not something you're going to remember if you don't deal with POPIA every day. But fortunately, you don't have to remember all of this if you keep the following quick wins in mind. These are tips that will equip you to comply with POPIA to a large extent without having to have your lawyer on speed dial. Just follow these steps and you will be covered. So let's first look at consent. As stated earlier, with POPIA a lot can be overcome if we have obtained consent. What follows are a few tips on obtaining consent. Obtain consent as many times as you can and in as many places as you can. The way we do this is to first look at all the forms we have in our business, whether they're digital or on paper. You will need to update them to include that you will be collecting personal information and why you need this information. In most cases, all you will have to do is to include a statement in your documentation to the effect that in order to, and here you will describe whatever product or service you are delivering, we need to collect the following information from you. And that could be your name and surname, phone number, address, email address, or any other information that you may need to collect. Then you add a statement where you say, in order for us to collect this information, we need your consent to do so. Please tick this box or sign here, whatever suits you, to provide us with this consent. It is very important to make sure that you can prove that consent was given by way of this positive expression of will. This means that consent cannot be assumed. You must ask for it and it must be given. And importantly, you must keep the proof that it was done. Now, if you have different forms for different customers or products or services, update those forms now to make sure that you get the consent you need. Also think of other touch points where you can collect consent to collect personal information. Now that we have dealt with consent, we need to secure all this information. The following steps will ensure that you are compliant with POPIA when dealing with personal information that you store in your business. Step 1. Figure out where your personal information is. This may sound complicated, but it really isn't. All you have to do is to think about your business processes. We all have them, even if we don't call them that. You could, for example, have a customer registration form, be it online or on paper, when you sign up a new customer. So, customer registration will be a business process. Now think of sales, marketing, accounting, HR, and all those other areas of your business. They all have their own processes. So once you have figured out what all your business processes are, think of what to do with each of these processes. For example, in a customer registration process, you will collect a lot of personal information such as a name, surname, phone number, etc. And now when you look at these other business processes, do they also require you to collect personal information? An easy way to figure this one out is to ask yourself, am I dealing with people in this process? In other words, the whole process you are looking at the moment, is there any interaction with a person or the information? If the answer is yes, you are dealing with personal information and you need to comply with POPIA. Secondly, if I outsource any of these business processes to a third party, do they touch a person or the information at any point? If the answer is yes, then you know that there's an operator in the chain and you need to ensure that they are also compliant when processing this personal information on your behalf. Once you have gone through this exercise with all your business processes, it will give you a great idea of where personal information interacts with your business and where not. Now cross off your list all processes that definitely has no human interaction, and this will leave you with the areas you need to focus on. I've included a nice little diagram. It's a chart that you can create for yourself where you can list all your business processes and then define whether or not POPIA would apply to them. You will see on the chart that we have indicated whether it's an in-person process, whether it's a document process, a paper process, or whether it is a digital process. The only reason that we've included that is because sometimes these processes work differently and we have to use different security measures for each of them. Let's look at the easiest one, the in-person process first. If the interaction with the data subject does not result in any personal information being captured, either on paper or digitally, there is nothing you have to do. However, if you're going to store something like contact information in your cell phone, make sure that the cell phone is at least password or PIN protected, and if you can, also encrypt the data on your cell phone. Most cell phones these days have the option of encrypting data on them, so if you can, do that. Now let's look at how we're going to secure paper-based information. In many business processes, we still use paper. If you are using paper, make sure you follow these simple rules. Number 1, keep a clean desk policy. This means don't let any paper lie around on your desk. Even if the paper does not contain personal information, don't keep it on your desk. It is all about the discipline of not having paper lying around. We all get busy and we don't have time to decide whether a piece of paper on our desks contains personal information or not. And if we don't have the discipline to always keep a clean desk policy, we will forget about that paper. And the paper with personal information will lie around. Destroy paper if you don't need it. If you don't need a piece of paper, destroy it. And I don't mean recycle it, I mean shred it. Again, get into the discipline of shredding all paper you no longer need so that you won't have to make the call whether or not the paper contains personal information or not. There are many shredding services available that will come out to share your documents on site at very reasonable rates. They provide you with a secure bin into which you can put your paper, and they will then come out once every now and again as agreed with them and shred your paper on site. The bonus is they also recycle the shredded paper at no cost to you. File and lock away paper you can't destroy. We all have paper records like employee files, tax documents, contracts, etc. that we simply cannot destroy. You will know that this is important information right from the outset, and you won't let it lie around in the first place, but you still need to make sure that you secure it. The best way to do it is to simply file the papers. Make sure you can lock the files away in a cabinet or a room that you can lock. Make sure that only authorized staff have access to this cabinet or room, and make sure that you or another trusted employee controls it. Number 4, digitize. Unlike paper, we can't get rid of all the paper that we generate. Think before you print. If you can PDF a document rather than to save it to your computer, then do it. Or can you perhaps scan an already printed document and then destroy the paper? If the answer is yes, then do it. It is far easier for paper to get lost or fall in the wrong hands than for digital files. Finally, look at what you print. Many people print a lot of personal information without collecting it from the printer immediately. So, for example, you may print out a proposal form, a copy of an ID or another document that contains personal information, and then you forget to collect it from the printer. This could easily cause the documents to fall into the wrong hands, especially if you work in an area that uses a communal print. If you follow these steps when dealing with paper in your business, you will have come a very long way in ensuring that you comply with the prescriptions of POPIA. Next, we're going to look at digital information. Digital information enters our business in many ways. Of course, there are online forms, social media platforms, and things like recorded phone calls and emails. We also have customer forms, contracts, maybe medical files, client profiles, marketing information, confidential documents, all of which is stored digitally. So we need to find a way to secure all of this information. The easiest way to do that is by encrypting our computers. The simple way to explain encryption is to describe it as locking information so that it is not accessible without the key that unlocks it. In a digital world, we call this encryption. And the best way to protect information on your computer is to encrypt it. It's easier than you think. Many versions of Windows 10 come with a free encryption tool called BitLocker, which you can use to encrypt your computer. If you use an older version of Windows, there are still many free encryption tools out there like TrueCrypt, Descryptor that you can download. LawTrust also offers state-of-the-art disk encryption tools for servers and larger networks. Once your computer has been encrypted, you are much safer. Now, if your computer is lost or stolen, any person trying to access it cannot do so, because without the decryption key, there is no way that they can action the information on it. Email. Email is probably the number one way in which personal digital information enters and leaves your business. The mere action of receiving an email is processing personal information, as defined in POPIA. Emails usually also have an email signature with a person's name, surname, phone number, work address, maybe even a cell phone number on it. The problem is that we don't think about email as a means of collecting and sharing personal information. What about bulk emails that we send to many people? Did you obtain consent from other people to share their email addresses? What about sending the wrong email to the wrong person? That's a breach of POPIA. Email is really tricky, and there are really only two ways to overcome the risks associated with email. The first one is training. You need to train yourself and your staff to be very careful when sending emails. Make sure you use the BCC field when you send an email to many people. Ensure that you don't send email to the wrong people, and make sure that you don't share information you are not permitted to in emails. This can take a lot of time and effort, and unfortunately we are all only human, so even with the best of intentions, we will make mistakes. The best way to overcome this is to use email encryption. Just like hard drive encryption, an encrypted email, even if it is intercepted, is completely useless to the person intercepting it if they don't have the decryption key. Again, there are free email encryption programs out there, but most people make use of Microsoft Outlook or G Suite, and these free programs are often not compatible with them. Still, the software is out there, and if you want to make use of it, you could. LawTrust can also assist you with email encryption software that you can integrate directly with Outlook. I cannot stress enough how important email encryption is, because if there is one natural point of failure in POPIA compliance, it will always be email. Finally, we're going to look at an often overlooked part of encrypting and making sure that our data is secure, and that is physical security. When we think POPIA, we think data and that we need to protect data, but we don't think this also includes physical security. Physical security is very easy to enforce, and our first line of defense in protecting not only personal information but also our business's other confidential information. And the best part is it's easy. Simple things such as locking doors, not allowing strangers to walk around your offices unaccompanied, making strangers wear access tags to clearly identify them, locking computer screens, not leaving paper lying around, are all physical security measures that we can implement at no or very low cost, and they will go a long way to being our first line of defense in protecting our personal information. Physical security is a state of mind. Think of what could go wrong. Look at your business from the perspective of a criminal looking to get access to it and trying to identify the weak spots. Then fix them, and before you know it, you will have set up your first line of defense in your journey towards POPIA compliance. We hope that in this very short video, we have given you some practical tips that you can use to ensure your POPIA is less is more.